In the year 1981, Prince Charles married Diana. The post-it note finally made its way to Britain, and at last, Yorkshire Police caught up with a notorious serial killer known as the Yorkshire Ripper.
The Yorkshire Ripper, a man called Peter Sutcliffe, had murdered 13 women between 1975 and 1980. The hunt for him was one of the most expensive and badly managed in British history, and the police had interviewed him no less than 9 times over 5 years before they finally concluded that he was the murderer.
Now, the horrid nature of the crimes and the fact the Ripper only seemed to target lone women attracted plenty of interest from both the public and the press. Unfortunately, it also attracted a lot of media speculation which made the investigation harder, and indeed letters and a hoax tape pretending to be the Yorkshire Ripper. All of these things made the investigation even more difficult for the police.
To make matters worse, the police didn't have the sophisticated technology that they use to solve mysteries today. Instead, they used a cumbersome system of cue cards, which was so massive and hard to cross-reference that a number of coincidences and vital pieces of evidence could not be investigated properly. Or if they were investigated, it took far too long.
Now, the police did eventually catch up with the Ripper, but just before I tell you how that happened, I'd like to say that I make these videos for interest, not for publicity and not for profit. If you enjoy hearing the legal stories, then check out some of the other interesting cases on my channel. Or you can also click the subscribe button, which lets YouTube notify you whenever I release another video.
Now, the Ripper Peter Sutcliffe was eventually arrested and finally charged, thanks to a few coincidences finally landing in the police's favour and one constable's hunch. The Ripper admitted to his crimes. He did claim insanity, and in case you're interested in the defence of insanity, I've made a video about that too. But the defence was denied by the jury, and Sutcliffe was handed a life sentence. Apparently, he was transferred to the notorious Broadmoor prison, where one of his fellow inmates was none other than London gang lord Ronnie Cray.
Now, the arrest of the Ripper was not the end of the story, far from it. The family of the Ripper's last victim, 20-year-old student Jacqueline Hill, were convinced that she would still be alive if it weren't for the negligence of the police. Now, what negligence means is that the police had a duty to protect citizens like Jacqueline, and they broke that duty by such improper management of the investigation. The question for the House of Lords, the highest court in England, was whether the police owed citizens like Jacqueline a duty, and whether letting the Ripper run free for another few years had broken that duty. Now, the police asked the House of Lords to strike out the appeal by Jacqueline Hill's family.
Now, striking out means that the police wanted to avoid going into detail about what they did and didn't do, nipping the case in the bud by saying that even if they had made mistakes, there was no duty to protect Jacqueline Hill from Peter Sutcliffe. This did, however, mean that for the purpose of the case, it was assumed that the force had made errors. It also meant the actual conduct of the police was never reviewed in the court. Much cheaper and quicker, but not particularly reassuring.
Lord Keith said, "The question of law opened up by the case is whether individual members of a police force owe a duty to individual members of the public who may suffer injury to person or property through the activities of criminals."
Lord Keith carefully examined the rules on negligence in English law, but decided that there was no duty owed to Jacqueline Hill, or, in fact, any other young woman living in the area at that time. He said the police had never known that Sutcliffe was the murderer until he was finally apprehended. They never had him in custody, And being a potential target just because she was young and female wasn't enough to give Jacqueline Hill a special right to expect protection from the police.
Now, establishing that there had been no duty in the first place and no breach was enough to dispense with the case on fairly uncontroversial legal principles. However, this doesn't seem like a very happy ending, does it? Perhaps Lord Keith himself was a bit uneasy about this because he then went on to justify the decision on slightly more unconventional grounds.
Lord Keith, joined by the other law lords, said the public shouldn't be able to sue police officers at all for the way they go about their job. He thought they would spend more time worrying about litigation and less time on policing, which wouldn't be good for anybody. Now, whether that's right or wrong, this was quite a big step to make in one court case, and it's still quite controversial now.
So there we are. Jacqueline Hill's family could not claim compensation from the Yorkshire Police, and nor could any of the Ripper's other victims. But this case laid down an even wider principle of British law that is still in force today, that generally it is almost impossible to sue British police for mismanagement of a case, even where that has allowed a criminal to run free and to injure somebody else. This principle was actually upheld quite recently in the case of Michael, which I've made a video about, and you can check that out on my channel. The hoaxer, John Humble, was eventually arrested in 2005 after a number of years, and he died of old age in 2019. The following year, Peter Sutcliffe, the Ripper himself, died in 2020. He never made it out of prison. But Jacqueline Hill and the other victims of the Yorkshire Ripper who died before the 21st century even arrived, did they get justice? I'll let you decide.